Good evening. I'm Sarah Cave from Sarah Cave Consulting, and I'm here tonight to walk through a couple of objectives. The first is just a quick recap on what you all approved last week, the board decision on moving forward to the next phase of the affiliation process. And the second objective is really kind of the focus of this evening, is to define and agree on the process that would actually take us into the next phase and what that will look like. So you all have seen and are familiar with the group agreements. These are primarily for when we get to the discussion point. And also just a quick reminder of where we are in the overall process. We'll be moving on soon. Looks like this pointer's not working, to phase 4. All right, so just a quick recap in terms of this next phase and what it's all about. You all last time agreed that it was time to take this next step, and that involves the drafting of a letter of intent. And the letter of intent really does two things. It is the preliminary defining of the main things that you are trying to accomplish with the affiliation for both parties. And the second thing that it does is it signifies and allows for both parties to move ahead with a deeper and more formal due diligence process. So the letter of intent, as we discussed last time, this is just kind of a recap slide here. Again, as I mentioned, it really begins to define the key points of a proposed deal. And it is not a definitive agreement. However, it is a significant commitment that you're making to move forward in a process, and it's a statement of intention that this is the party with which you are hoping to come to a deal. And the language used in writing the letter of intent is really important. Take some thoughtful dialogue and participation. And it can really, in terms of its significance, be thought of as an engagement ring. And primarily that's because you are intending to be in a period of discussions and dialogue with the other party. And so at that point, presumably you're not fooling around on the side. So that's kind of the analogy there. The due diligence process, which also we talked a little bit about last time. And as one of the things that I mentioned, which I'll just remind everyone, is that in a public process like this, the amount of data and information sharing that we've been able to do has been somewhat limited, primarily because the other party in this proposed possible affiliation is not a public entity and is not at the point quite yet to be able to divulge a lot of information. So once again, that's why it's important that you all have agreed to move forward to this next phase with a letter of intent and to define a process moving forward where we could do a deeper level of due diligence. And I don't think I'll reread the definition of due diligence, but essentially it accomplishes two things. One is that next level of information that you all, I know, are hungry to gather about Astria, and that they're really eager to gather about this organization. And then there are also a number of different things which we have some meetings as early as next week to talk about. There are other components that are outside of the sort of data sharing and are more formal legal and regulatory requirements that you have to move through in this due diligence process to get to a definitive agreement. Okay, so, excuse me, so that really takes us to the meat of what our discussion is tonight, and that is the process for this next phase. And what is really critical, as I've mentioned, with regard to due diligence and will enable a much deeper level of information sharing to occur, is to form a negotiating team. And the negotiating team that we are proposing would have 2 board members on it. And the 2 that we're recommending as your consultants are your board chair and your finance committee chair. So that would be President Norris and Commissioner Spikers. And in addition, it would have Tom Parker and Skip Hauser, General Counsel, who would be working periodically in consultation throughout the process with outside counsel, someone who's really well versed in business transactions like this. And Steve and I would also be participating in this process on this negotiating team. We would request that Astria form the same sort of a team, and that the negotiating teams from both parties would be working together over a period of the next short period of time to actually draft the key components of the letter of intent so that we can all move forward into that due diligence process. Of course, the final approval, the final draft and decision and approval of a letter of intent would come forward not only to this board for approval, but also the Astria Health board. So a little bit more about just the kind of the rationale here in terms of this negotiating team approach. Really the primary reason for this is that you are a public hospital district, and getting to that next level of strategic data sharing really requires handling information in a very sensitive manner. And that really goes for both parties. The negotiating team process would allow for the content shared and the discussions among those team members to be considered work product. And Skip could certainly answer more detailed questions about that. But essentially, it means that we would have some liberty to be able to freely discuss that information without all of it being subject to a public records request. The approach that we are recommending here is really characterized by a smaller team that allows for some nimbleness and efficiency to be able to move through what will definitely be a few weeks of an iterative process before arriving at a really good, solid final draft letter of intent. And once again, just to kind of reaffirm that the final draft letter of intent, as well as key decisions and deal points that might emerge from the due diligence process, would be coming forward to both boards. So with that, wanted to move to an action. And the question on the table is, does the board approve of the process moving forward that I just outlined on slide 10, including the formation of a negotiating team to work on a draft letter of intent and move into the due diligence process?
I have a motion to approve the process moving forward as outlined in slide 10, including formation of the negotiating team to work on the draft in the way.
Sorry, discussion. Yeah, discussion. I understand the importance of holding and forming a negotiating team, but we, the 5 commissioner boards, would also be interested in knowing or maybe sharing our own personal opinions as well. So I would like to, I guess, take a motion, or maybe I should, to introduce that we should have a work study regarding what would be included into that letter of intent from the rest of the other commissioners besides just two commissioners.
Is that an message?
It's the discussion. I think we're on the discussion right now before we.
Well, we've got a motion. And wait, did you get a second to the motion?
There was a second. So
Okay.
discussion is the negotiating team. So we feel like, you know, the rest of the board should be.
I do have a question. I mean, this is just a recommendation, and I don't think we've selected the negotiating team yet. So, and we only can have two working at a time, I believe, to be looking at these things. We can only have two by law. Am I wrong on that?
No, that's correct. Otherwise, you have an open public meeting, so you have a quorum.
Yeah, so that's the one legal issue I see on this. Is there a way to include the rest of the board on a kind of a updated status type of? Yeah, the board should be included as far as being able to have status and input, but they cannot work part of this process. That's the legal constraint. So how can we do that? Because I know Commissioner Herron has a very passionate reason for what she just said, and she does want to contribute to work on this LOI.
So I think there's a variety, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk or not. Is that okay? I think there's a variety of different ways that the members of the negotiating team could solicit input from board members on the things that they believe are most important to address as you begin this process of the drafting of a letter of intent. I guess my bias and my counsel, just having been through these processes in the past, would be not to do that in a public meeting. However, I think, you know, that there clearly are a number of different approaches you could take, and gathering input from each of the commissioners on what they believe is most important for you to carry into those discussions seems very appropriate.
I am wondering if we could have a potential executive session. I think we ought to.
Yeah, Vice President Johnson, potentially not. We have to follow within one of the exceptions to the open public meeting going into the executive session. When you get to the point where you're going to be talking about prices for leasing the hospital, then you could go into executive session for that. But otherwise, to go into executive session to discuss the negotiating part, you're probably not going to go to this time. You wouldn't fall under one of the exceptions.
Even if you're talking how you're going to arrange things, I mean, we're talking real estate, we're talking.
When you start talking about real estate and prices, and you're talking about lease amounts, yes, you could go into executive session for that.
Yes.
I understand, Skip, that it is only the lease price that allows you to go into executive session with respect to real estate transactions. So if you start talking about the other terms of the potential deal, that does not qualify.
That's correct. Yeah, our state Supreme Court came down in recent cases on that out of the Port of Vancouver.
Well, one of the things I thought might be helpful, it would require more time by whoever the negotiators are, but I, you know, if I was a negotiator, I would entertain a bi-weekly type of status meeting with any of the other commissioners that are not in the team to address their concerns and get their input,
Yes, yeah.
and to go through this LOI process where we are kind of give them a summary and status, if that would be something that would be helpful.
Yeah, I would be more in favor of that solution, yes, so we can have our own.
I know how much you want to contribute, you have some good ideas, so that's why
Thank you, Commissioner.
I think too, there's a sense of responsibility for all of us. That we all, we're all here representing our community, and we all see different things at different times. And so I think that if we can get input from each of us, I think it's valuable to what happens and what we say to the public or don't say. And I'm not sure how we do that.
Madam President, also, how do we get input from the public? Public would be very concerned about the provisions such as LOI. And it seems to me that since they own the hospital, it would be nice to get input from the public.
I don't know that I have the answer to that, but it seems to me it would be a little further down the process when we actually have some kind of an LOI that we are legitimately considering, then that would be the time for public comment.
Well, what I hear from the public is that they don't have sufficient input during the policy formulation stage. The problem is that once an LOI is cast, it's very difficult to make any changes from that point on. So I'm just asking, how could we get more public participation opportunity for people to comment during the policy formulation stage with LOI formulation?
well, my understanding is the LOI could not be approved without the full board meeting.
That's right. You'd have to bring back the draft.
It seems to me they could comment at a board meeting on the LOI, obtain the LOI a week ahead of time, be ready to make comments, and then that's the process. So I'm not sure if there's why that's not sufficient.
No, it's because once the LOI is cast, it's very difficult to change it. What I hear is that during the policy formulation stage is where the public would like to be involved.
What do you mean by cast?
Well, it comes as a finished draft.
I'd like to move on. Are there any other comments? Do you have any comments, Joe?
No, the only comment I have regarding this whole thing is we are each publicly elected, and if you're not doing your own due diligence within your particular part of the community to ask questions, seek out, give the information and ask questions, that's part of, I consider my job.
But what if you don't
Yes,
have the
Commissioner
information to respond to questions?
I think that's a good way to do it. I know if we do have a draft LOI, I'm going to immediately send it out to the Fall City group and say, hey, we're having a meeting. This is a draft. Love to have some comments. Come to the meeting or send me a comment in writing. I've got, I think there's about 800 members or 600 members on that group. So I think that would probably be a good starting point, at least.
Commissioner?
Perhaps maybe even consider having a town hall meeting to invite some of our constituents.
I don't know that we have to resolve that. No, do we? No. Commissioner Collins?
I'm concerned about costs, and that is the consultation with the outside counsel. Would you provide an estimate of the costs?
So I'm not prepared to do that at the moment. I believe that your general counsel and your superintendent are in discussions about what that might look like and who the most appropriate candidates would be. And I'm quite sure they'd be bringing that information back to you.
And that is, since we're going to be working closely with this other entity, and they have legal staff, full-time legal staff, several of them, could we have them draft the legal part of the LOI or whatever it's going to be, and then have city council look at it and see at that point we need to bring in our own counsel. In other words, we'll have the work done by their in-house legal counsel, because theoretically we've been working together and everybody's on the same page.
By Astria's?
Try to save the the situation where each one of you has to hire specialized counsel. It might not be necessary if you work together.
Do you want me to, can I say something? Okay, so presumably, the legal counsel for Astria Health would be a part of this negotiating team and would be working very closely with Skip. There are just certain key points, and that's one of the reasons why on this slide I said with consultation, now this pointer's working, with consultation from outside counsel, just to make sure that you understand that we have the benefit now of having 2 attorneys representing each individual organization, controlling how much they're utilizing their outside counsel and only doing it for the things that are required.
Can I answer your question, Commissioner Pollard?
I heard the answer, yes.
Is there any other discussion? No, we can call for the question. Alright. So we're going to vote all those, what is the question? That's the board approved, right there.
The motion was made.
That's the board approved. Decision of the motion, okay, we already have a motion, and we already have a second, so correct? Discussions. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.